from the void to the flood's shadow, a world born and broken. Gather close once more, and let the ancient scroll unfurl. We begin not with kings or empires, but at the very dawn of time itself, in a profound and echoing emptiness. In the beginning, there was only formless void, a deep, watery darkness, shrouding everything, and the Spirit of God, like a mighty wind, swept over the face of these chaotic, primordial waters. On the second day, God spoke again, carving out a vast expanse, the sky, the heavens, a great dome separating the waters above from the waters below. On the third day, he commanded the waters under the sky to gather into one place, revealing dry ground, the earth. From this fertile, newborn earth sprang forth every kind of plant and tree, yielding seed and fruit according to its kind. Verdant life, lush and vibrant, covered the world. The fourth day saw God hang great lights in the expanse of the sky, the greater light, the sun, to rule the day with its warmth and brilliance, and the lesser light, the moon, to rule the night with its gentle glow, along with countless stars. Like scattered diamonds, these became signs for seasons, days, and years, bringing order to the cycles of time. On the fifth day, God filled the gathered waters with teeming schools of shimmering fish and great, mysterious sea monsters, and the sky above with every kind of bird, from the tiny sparrow to the soaring eagle. He blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the skies." Then God spoke. His voice, the first sound in eternity, shattered the silence. "Let there be light." And light burst forth, pure and radiant, separating itself from the clinging darkness. God saw that the light was good, and he named the light day, and the darkness night. Evening passed, and morning came, the very first day. So God formed the first man, Adam, from the dust of the ground. He wasn't merely shaped. God breathed into Adam's nostrils the very breath of life, his own spirit, and Adam became a living soul, animated dust, bearing the divine image. God planted a garden towards the east, in a place called Eden, a paradise beyond imagining, bursting with beauty and abundance. He caused every tree pleasing to the sight and good for food to grow there, including two unique trees at its heart, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A mighty river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, splitting into four great rivers that watered the wider world, the Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. But Eden's peace was fragile, shadowed by a subtle presence. There was a serpent, the craftiest of all creatures God had made. This serpent approached Eve and hissed a question designed to erode trust. Did God actually say, "You shall not eat of any tree in the garden"? Eve, knowing the command, corrected him. "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden." But God said, "You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." And the serpent, struck with its true venom, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." God placed Adam in this garden to work it and keep it. He gave Adam a solemn foundational command. "You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." Seeing Adam alone, God declared, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." So he caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, took one of his ribs, and closed up its place with flesh. From the rib, God fashioned a woman. When he brought her to Adam, Adam recognized her instantly as part of himself, crying out, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, Isha, because she was taken out of man, Ish." Thus, The first man and woman, Adam and Eve, stood together in innocence and intimacy, naked and unashamed, in perfect harmony with God, each other, and the whole of creation. God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. The sixth day ended, and on the seventh day, God rested from all his work, blessing and hallowing it. Peace reigned. Eve looked at the forbidden tree. The fruit seemed intensely good for food, beautiful and pleasing to the eye, and above all, desirable to make one wise. To grasp that knowledge reserved for God, temptation overwhelmed her. She reached out, took the fruit, and ate. Then Adam, who was right there with her, took the fruit she offered and ate it too. Instantly, their eyes were opened, but not to godhood. They saw their nakedness and felt a profound, burning shame they had never known. Hastily, they sewed fig leaves together, crude garments to cover themselves. When they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, they hid among the trees, hearts pounding with terror. God called out, "Where are you?" Adam confessed their fear and their nakedness. God asked the piercing questions. Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? Adam pointed at Eve. The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree, and I ate. Eve pointed at the serpent. The serpent deceived me, and I ate. God pronounced judgment. The serpent was cursed above all livestock, doomed to crawl on its belly and eat dust. Enmity was placed between its offspring, representing evil, and the woman's offspring, a promise of a future Redeemer who would crush the serpent's head, though suffering a wound himself. Pain in childbirth and desire tempered by conflict would mark Eve's life. Adam's curse was relentless toil. The ground itself was cursed because of him. Thorns and thistles would now choke it. He would sweat and struggle to wrest food from it until he returned to the dust from which he came. Yet, even in judgment, God showed tender mercy. He made garments of skins for Adam and Eve, the first sacrifice, requiring the life of an animal to cover their shame. But they could not stay in Eden, lest they eat from the tree of life and live forever in their fallen state. Gently but firmly, God drove them out, placing mighty cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way back to the tree of life. Paradise was lost. The gate closed behind them. Life outside Eden was harsh, marked by sweat, pain, and the struggle against the cursed ground. Yet life persisted. Eve conceived and bore their first son. Filled with hope and the memory of God's help, she named him Cain, declaring, "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord." Later, she bore another son, Abel. As they grew, Cain became a worker of the ground, tilling the soil, battling thorns and thistles. Abel became a keeper of sheep, tending flocks on the open land. In time, they brought offerings to God. Abel, in faith and reverence, brought the firstborn of his flock, their choicest fat portions, a costly sacrifice. Cain brought some fruit of the ground, an offering, perhaps, but not his firstfruits, not offered with the same whole heart. The Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but not for Cain and his. Cain burned with furious anger. His face darkened and fell. God warned him directly, "Why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it." Cain ignored the divine warning. Consumed by jealousy and rage, he spoke to his brother Abel. He lured him out into the open field, a place of isolation. There, Cain rose up against his own brother and killed him. The earth drank the blood of the innocent. God confronted Cain. "Where is Abel your brother?" Cain lied defiantly. "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" God declared, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." Cain was cursed from the very ground he worked. It would no longer yield its strength to him. He was condemned to be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Terrified that others would kill him, Cain cried out. God, in mercy yet again, placed a mark on Cain, a sign of divine protection, declaring severe punishment on anyone who killed him. Cain went away from the presence of the Lord entirely, settling in the land of Nod, east of Eden. There he built a city named Enoch after his firstborn son. His descendants became founders of nomadic life, tent dwellers, inventors of metalworking, Tubal-Cain, and musicians, Jubal. But violence marked his line deeply. His descendant Lamech boasted of killing a man for wounding him, claiming greater vengeance than Cain himself. After the unimaginable grief of losing Abel and the exile of Cain, Adam and Eve had another son. Eve named him Seth, meaning appointed, declaring, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. Seth was a new beginning, a spark of hope in the lineage of the faithful. When Seth was 105 years old, he fathered Enosh. It was during this time that a significant shift occurred. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord, a more formal, communal turning towards worship amidst the growing shadows. Adam, live 930 years. Genesis tells us clearly that after fathering Seth, Adam lived 800 more years and had other sons and daughters. This pattern continued with Seth and his descendants over the incredibly long lifespans of these early generations. Seth lived 912 years, Enosh 905, Kenan 910, Mahalalel 895, Jared 962. Then came Enoch, Jared's son. Enoch walked with God in such profound intimacy and faithfulness that after 365 years, he simply was not, for God took him. Enoch bypassed death. He was translated directly into God's presence. Enoch's son was Methuselah, whose name carried a weighty meaning. When he dies, it shall be sent. He became the longest-lived man recorded, living an astonishing 969 years. Methuselah's son was Lamech, and Lamech had a son whom he named Noah, saying, Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. Lamech saw in his son a hope for respite from the burdens of the cursed earth. Generations passed. Humanity multiplied across the face of the earth. But while the line of Seth began with calling on the Lord, a terrible corruption began to spread. The sons of God, understood by many as descendants of Seth, the godly line, or possibly angelic beings who abandoned their domain, saw that the daughters of men, descendants of Cain, or the general population, increasingly marked by worldly ways, were beautiful. They took any they chose as wives, violating the order God had established. From these unions came the Nephilim, mighty warriors, men of fearsome renown, giants who strode the earth in ancient days. Violence exploded. Wickedness became the very air people breathed. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The corruption wasn't occasional. It was total, pervasive, unrelenting. The weight of this universal evil pressed down on the very heart of God, and the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. The beautiful creation, declared very good, was now saturated with violence, rebellion, and the stench of death. The divine grief was profound, a sorrow echoing through the heavens. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. The judgment was terrifying. The waters held back since the second day would be unleashed. Creation would be undone in a cataclysmic flood of divine sorrow and righteous wrath. The world born from the breath of God would be returned to the watery chaos from which it came. But there was one man. One man whose life cut through the universal darkness. One man who, like his ancestor Enoch, walked with God. One man who found favor in the eyes of the Lord. That man was Noah, the son of Lamech, the grandson of Methuselah, a direct descendant of Seth and Adam. In a world drowning in evil, Noah stood as a solitary beacon of righteousness. And God would speak to Noah. The fate of creation hangs suspended. What word will God speak to this one righteous man? How can a single family stand against the coming torrent? The hammer of judgment is poised to fall, yet a thread of mercy remains. Closing parenthesis. The air itself felt heavy, thick with violence and the stench of unchecked desire. For 120 years, a warning echoed through the corrupted earth, a divine countdown whispered on the wind, carried by the groaning of the ground and the uneasy, cries of creatures sensing a coming cataclysm. But humanity, drunk on its own power and consumed by wickedness, mocked the notion. All, that is, except one man. Noah. God spoke to Noah, his voice cutting through the spiritual darkness that enveloped the world. The message was terrifying, yet woven with a thread of unimaginable grace. I have determined to make an end of all flesh, the Lord declared, his words heavy with the grief of a creator betrayed. The earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. The beautiful creation, nurtured from the void, was to be unmade by the very waters held back since the second day. The fountains of the great deep would rupture. The windows of the heavens would be thrown open. A flood, a deluge of unimaginable power, would cleanse the corrupted land. But then came the word that changed everything for Noah. But that single syllable carried the weight of salvation. But I will establish my covenant with you. Noah, alone among millions, stood as the recipient of God's promise. He was chosen, not because he was perfect, but because he walked with God, a man of integrity, blameless in his generation, a solitary beacon of righteousness, flickering in a world plunged into moral night. You shall come into the ark, God instructed, you and your sons, and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. 8 souls, a remnant, a new beginning carried within the hull of a vessel not yet built. The instructions were precise, a divine blueprint for survival. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Gopher wood, a timber lost to time, perhaps a mighty cypress or cedar, chosen for its strength and resistance to rot. This was no ordinary boat. It was a floating fortress, a sanctuary designed by God himself. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. The pitch, thick, black, sticky bitumen, would seal every seam, making the ark watertight against the coming torrent. The dimensions were staggering, designed for endurance and capacity, not speed. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. A cubit was roughly the length of a man's forearm, about 18 inches. So picture a colossal structure, 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall, like a massive rectangular barge, towering higher than a 4-story building and longer than a modern football field. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above. This roof likely sloped gently, allowing water to run off, with a gap beneath it for ventilation. Set the door of the ark in its side, a single massive entrance, the only way in or out. Make it with lower, second, and third decks, 3 vast levels, maximizing space for the incredible cargo to come. 120 years, Noah labored. Imagine the scene, a solitary shipyard rising in a world consumed by brutality. Noah, likely aided by his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and perhaps their wives, became shipwrights on a scale never before imagined. The rhythmic blows of axes felling mighty trees, the rasp of saws, the groaning of timbers being shaped and fitted, the acrid smell of pitch bubbling in great cauldrons, painstakingly applied to every plank. It was an act of monumental faith. Noah preached righteousness as he built, a herald of righteousness, 2 Peter 2-5, warning of the judgment to come. The people saw the colossal structure rising, a grotesque joke on dry land, a testament to one man's perceived madness. They scoffed. They mocked. Rain? Flood? Preposterous. The very concept of rain was alien before the flood. Genesis 2-5-6 suggests a different hydrology.
The
Their
downpour
hearts
was
remained
relentless.
hard,
Rain
their
fell
minds
upon the earth
closed,
40 days and 40
they
nights.
continued
The
to
waters
eat,
from below and the waters
drink,
from above met in a
marry,
terrifying
and revel in
crescendo.
their
The
violence,
floodgates of creation had been
utterly
thrown open.
oblivious to the
Rivers
doom,
became oceans.
gathering like
Valleys
storm
vanished.
clouds
Hills
just
were
beyond their
submerged. The
perception.
ark, lifted by
Finally,
the rising
the day
waters,
arrived.
began to move.
The
It
ark
didn't
stood
sail.
complete,
It floated on the
a
face of the
titanic
waters.
monument
It was
to
carried,
obedience.
a helpless giant on
God
an endless,
spoke again
churning
to
sea.
Noah,
The waters
"Go
prevailed
into
so
the
mightily
ark,
on the earth
you
that all the
and
high
all your
mountains
household,
under the whole
for
heaven
I
were
have
covered.
seen that you are
Imagine the
righteous
peaks of the
before me in this
Himalayas,
generation.
the Andes,
The
the
moment of
Alps,
separation
all
had
swallowed
come.
by the relentless,
Noah didn't
rising tide. 15
hesitate.
cubits deep above
He
the
led
highest
his wife,
mountains, the waters
his 3
rose,
sons,
ensuring utter
Shem,
destruction.
Ham,
And all flesh
and
died
Japheth,
that moved on the
and
earth.
their wives
Birds,
through that single
livestock,
massive door.
beasts, all swarming
8 souls
creatures that
stepping
swarm
from
on
a
the earth,
condemned
and
world
all
into a
mankind.
vessel of
Everything
hope
on the
now.
dry land in
Then
whose
came the most
nostrils was the
astonishing
breath of life
procession
died.
the
The
world
judgment
had
was
ever
total,
witnessed.
horrific,
Of every
complete.
clean animal
Only the ark
you shall
remained,
take 7
a solitary
pairs,
speck adrift
the male
on an
and his
infinite,
female,
watery grave,
and of
bearing
the
within
animals
its
that are
creaking
not
timbers
clean
the
too,
fragile,
the
precious
male
hope
and
of
his
a new
female.
world. Inside the ark,
And of the
the
birds
roar
of the
the
heavens
waters
also
and the
7
wind
pairs,
would have been terrifying.
male
The groaning
and
of the
female,
massive timbers,
to keep
the
their
cries
offspring
and bellows
alive
of frightened
on the face
animals,
of all
the
the
dim
earth.
light filtering to
Genesis
the single den
7 to
above.
2
This
to
was the
3.
reality for Noah
Clean
and his family.
animals,
They were
those
safe,
later
sealed
designated
in
for
by God,
sacrifice
yet
and
surrounded
food
by the
under
terrifying
Mosaic
evidence of
law,
divine wrath
needed
and the
7
utter extinction
pairs
of the world they had
to
known.
ensure
For
survival
150
and
days,
for
the
future
waters would prevail
sacrifices.
upon the earth. A
Unclean
seemingly endless
animals
expanse
needed
of death
only
beneath
one
a
pair.
sky still weeping the last of
Birds,
its judgment.
vital for scattering seeds and repopulating after the flood, also required 7 pairs. Imagine the scene guided by divine instinct. Elephants trumpeting, lumbering towards the ark. Lions padding silently, their powerful muscles rippling. Flocks of birds, eagles, sparrows, doves, swirling overhead before finding perches within. Reptiles slithering, insects buzzing, cattle lowing, wolves howling. A vast, orderly, yet seemingly chaotic menagerie converging on the ark from every corner of the land. Predator and prey, side by side, driven by a primal understanding that this was sanctuary. Noah and his family worked tirelessly, guiding them to their designated stalls and nests within the 3 vast decks. The air filled with the sounds and smells of countless creatures, a microcosm of creation packed within the wooden walls. Food stores, meticulously gathered over years, hay, grain, dried fruits, meat, are stacked high, and the Lord shut him in. Genesis 7:16. With the last creature settled and the last human safely inside, God himself sealed the massive door. That act was profound. It signified God's absolute control over salvation and judgment. The door was shut against the raging floodwaters too. Calm, but also shut against any last-minute plea from the outside world that had rejected 120 years of warning. Safety was now irrevocably sealed within. Doom was irrevocably sealed without. For 7 days, an eerie stillness descended. The ark sat like a silent giant on dry land. Inside, the noises of the animals, the murmurs of the human family. Outside, perhaps the mocking had finally ceased, replaced by a dawning, dreadful uncertainty. What were they waiting for? Then, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, likely corresponding to late October, early November, in our calendar. The foundations of the world shuddered. All the fountains of the great deep burst forth. Imagine colossal subterranean reservoirs, pressurized for millennia, exploding upwards. Geysers of scalding water and steam rocketed skyward, tearing the earth apart. Vast chasms opened, swallowing landscapes. Simultaneously, the windows of the heavens were opened. Not gentle rain, but a catastrophic deluge. The waters above the expanse, Genesis 1-7, held back since creation, cascaded down in a world-drowning torrent. It wasn't just rain. It was the collapse of the atmospheric canopy that had once enveloped the earth. The downpour was relentless. Rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Genesis 7-12. The waters from below and the waters from above met in a terrifying crescendo. The floodgates of creation had been thrown open. Rivers became oceans. Valleys vanished. Hills were submerged. The ark, lifted by the rising waters, began to move. It didn't sail. It floated on the face of the waters. Genesis 7:18. It was carried, a helpless giant on an endless churning sea. The waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. Genesis 7:19. Imagine the peaks of the Himalayas, the Andes, the Alps, all swallowed by the relentless rising tide. 15 cubits deep, about 22 feet, above the highest mountains, the waters rose, ensuring utter destruction. And all flesh died that moved on the earth. Birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. Genesis 7:21-22. The judgment was total, horrific, complete. Only the ark remained, a solitary speck adrift on an infinite watery grave, bearing within its creaking timbers the fragile, precious hope of a new world. Inside the ark, the roar of the waters and the wind would have been terrifying. The groaning of the massive timbers, the cries and bellows of frightened animals, the dim light filtering through the single vent above. This was the reality for Noah and his family. They were safe, sealed in by God, yet surrounded by the terrifying evidence of divine wrath and the utter extinction of the world they had known. For 150 days, the waters would prevail upon the earth, a seemingly endless expanse of death beneath a sky still weeping the last of its judgment. The ark walked on the face of the deep, carrying the future, waiting for the whispered promise of dry land and the sign of God's enduring mercy yet to come. The ark voyaged through the abyss and the whisper of renewal. The roar was unimaginable. Inside the sealed ark, the sound wasn't just heard, it was felt. It vibrated through the massive gopher wood beams, a constant thunderous drone punctuated by the sharp crack of titanic waves slamming against the hull. The pitch sealing the scenes groaned under the pressure, holding back the furious churning death that pressed in from every side. Light was a scarce commodity, filtering dimly through the single vent beneath the roof, casting long, shifting shadows across the 3 crowded decks. The air hung thick and heavy, a potent mixture of damp wood, warm animal hides, hay, grain, dung, and the sharp tang of fear. It was the smell of life preserved amidst utter annihilation. For 40 days and 40 nights, the cataclysm raged unabated. The fountains of the deep roared, spewing scalding water and mud, shaking the very foundations of the drowned earth. The windows of heaven poured forth not rain, but a solid drowning curtain that blotted out the sun, moon, and stars. The ark wasn't sailing. It was adrift, a colossal cork tossed on an ocean that had swallowed mountains whole. Inside, Noah, his wife, his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, 8 souls bearing the weight of humanity's future, labored ceaselessly. Their days were a rhythm of survival, feeding the vast menagerie, drawing water from stored reserves, cleaning stalls and pens, calming frightened beasts. Lions roared in their confined spaces, cattle lowed uneasily, birds fluttered nervously in their cages. The unnatural proximity of predator and prey was a constant tension, held in check only by a divine stillness imposed upon the animal kingdom. A fragile peace amidst the roaring chaos outside. Sleep was fitful, snatched in moments of exhaustion. The cries of animals, the groaning of the ship, the terrifying sounds of the world ending just beyond the wooden walls, it seeped into their bones. What thoughts haunted Noah? Did he hear the distant, final screams swallowed by the waves in those first terrible hours? Did he mourn the world he knew, the cousins, the distant kin, the neighbors who had mocked his life's work? Did he question, even for a moment, the terrifying promise of the God he walked with? The weight of being, the sole righteous man in a world drowned for its sin, was a burden heavier than the ark itself. After the 40 days of relentless deluge, the sources of the flood ceased. The fountains of the deep sealed their wounds. The windows of heaven slammed shut. But the waters continued to prevail upon the earth for 150 days. 5 months adrift on an endless, featureless sea. The roaring lessened, replaced by the vast, eerie silence of deep water and the constant sloshing against the hull. The sky remained a leaden gray, the sun a forgotten memory. The ark rose and fell on colossal swells, a speck on an infinite, watery grave. Inside, the routine continued. Feed, water, clean, tend. The seasons were lost. Time was measured only in the passing of meals and the slow, shared dread. Hope was a fragile ember, easily extinguished by the monotony and the oppressive knowledge of what lay beneath them. And God remembered Noah, double quotes, Genesis 8:1. This simple phrase carries the weight of salvation. Amidst the silence of the drowned world, God's attention focused on that single fragile vessel. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. It was the first act of recreation. A divine wind, echoing the Spirit hovering over the primordial waters, began to stir the stagnant deep. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the relentless, drowning sea began to recede. After 150 days, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Genesis 8:4. Imagine the shuddering impact, the groaning timbers settling onto solid rock far beneath the surface. They were grounded, no longer adrift, but they were still submerged, trapped high on a drowned mountain range. The date was the 17th day of the 7th month, over 5 months since the flood began. 40 days after grounding, Noah, straining his eyes through the vent, saw the tops of other mountains breaking the surface of the receding waters like jagged teeth. Land, the first glimpse of the old world re-emerging. Hope, tentative but real, began to stir within the ark. Now came the agonizing vigil of waiting. Noah needed confirmation, a sign that the earth could sustain life again. He chose a messenger. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. Genesis 8:6-7. The raven, a strong, intelligent bird, likely black against the gray waters, flew out. It didn't return. It flew to and fro, finding perches on the emerging mountain peaks, perhaps feasting on the floating carcasses that littered the receding waters. It was a survivor, but it brought no news of renewal. Next, Noah sent forth a dove. The dove, a symbol of purity and gentleness, flew out. But it found no place to set her foot. The waters still covered the lower land. Exhausted, it returned to the safety of the ark, fluttering back through the window. Noah reached out his hand and gently brought it inside. He waited 7 more days. Again, he sent the dove forth. This time, the dove returned in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Genesis 8:11. Imagine the moment. Noah holding the small green leaf, still vibrant and alive. It was incontrovertible proof. The waters had receded enough for trees, olive trees, known for their hardiness, to be exposed, and new growth had already begun. Life was returning. The dove brought not just a leaf, but the first tangible promise of the future. Hope blossomed within the ark's dim interior. Noah waited another 7 days and sent the dove out once more. This time, it did not return. It had found dry land, food, and nesting places. The earth was ready. In the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth. Genesis 8:13. A new year, symbolically. Noah carefully removed part of the ark's covering, revealing the sky. He saw the earth, scarred, muddy, but dry. The vast, suffocating sea was gone, replaced by emerging valleys and plains. Yet Noah waited. He waited for the divine word. He had learned patience during the long months adrift. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Genesis 8:14. Finally, God spoke. Go out from the ark, you and your wife, and your sons and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Genesis 8:16-17. Imagine the scene as the massive door, sealed by God himself, was finally opened. Bright, unfiltered sunlight, likely the first they had seen in over a year, flooded into the ark, momentarily blinding. Fresh air, crisp and clean, scoured the stale interior, carrying the scent of damp earth and new life. The roar of the sea. Flood was replaced by an immense, profound silence, broken only by the wind and the tentative calls of birds. One by one, family group by family group, the animals emerged. Elephants trumpeted, shaking their heads. Lions stretched, blinking in the light. Birds exploded into the sky in joyous, swirling flocks. Insects buzzed free. Every creature, driven by the divine command renewed in their hearts, stepped out onto the mud-caked slopes of Ararat. The earth, washed clean but scarred, teemed with life once more. Noah's first act was one of profound gratitude and consecration. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took stones, perhaps carried within the ark or found nearby, and built a simple, powerful structure. From the clean animals and clean birds, those saved in 7 specifically for this purpose, he selected offerings, and took some of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Genesis 8:20. The scent of the sacrifice, the first fire kindled on the renewed earth, rose as sweet incense towards heaven. It was an act of thanksgiving for salvation, an acknowledgement of God's sovereignty, and a plea for mercy for this new beginning. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, ... The language is anthropomorphic, conveying God's deep satisfaction, not with the smell of burning flesh, but with the heart behind it, Noah's faith, obedience, and gratitude. The Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time, and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, shall not cease. Genesis 8:21-22. It was a promise rooted in the reality of human sinfulness, yet graciously limiting his judgment. The fundamental rhythms of creation, the seasons, The cycle of day and night were established as enduring signs of his faithfulness. Then God spoke a blessing and a covenant directly to Noah and his sons, echoing the command given to Adam. But now on a cleansed earth, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Genesis 9:1. Dominion over the creatures was reaffirmed, but with a new gravity. The fear of man would now be upon them. And then came the covenant sign, God's bow. Of peace hung in the clouds. I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. Genesis 9:9-11. This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you. For all future generations, I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Genesis 9:12-13. Imagine the first time they saw it. After a cleansing rain shower, as the sun broke through the retreating clouds, a magnificent arc of color appeared. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, spanning the heavens. It was God's war bow laid aside, its arrow pointed away from the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant. Genesis 9:14-15. Every rainbow became, and remains, a divine memorial, a whisper of mercy in the sky, a promise that however deep the darkness, the waters of judgment will not rise again. The long night of the flood was over, the first dawn of a new world, bearing the scars of the old, but bathed in the light of God's enduring promise, had broken.